Howdy, partners. Welcome to Friendly Ties. We're heading down to the Southwest because this is Great Western Trail El Paso.
Not supposed to laugh.
No notes. 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
So we have covered Great Western Trail a fair amount on this podcast. It's one of my favorite games. Also, I know Anastasia's quite a fan, and we've roped in Jonathan and started convincing him that some of the versions of Great Western Trail are worth the attention.
Slowly
Yep,
dragging him in. Yep.
Yeah,
Come to the universe. Come to the fold.
And El Paso is actually, I think, not even physically released, but it is on beta on Board Game Arena right now, and we've been playing a fair amount. So we want to. It's early days, but I've already played something ridiculous like 25 games. So
yeah,
I have a paltry
Just,
5 plays, I think. Which
I think I have about 8. So
this game kind of like enthralled me. Like we played it the first time, and then I was just like I couldn't stop.
Yeah, 5 games
about
for
it.
John is a lot.
It is.
Just to be clear, that is like you full commit.
So we should probably like take care of the elephant in the room, right? It says Great Western Trail. Yeah. Is this is it Great Western Trail like New Zealand, et cetera, et cetera? And like, no, this is a much faster, streamlined game.
Yeah, it's quite different. If you're familiar with like raw dice game, like I would say that it's something like that where it shares certainly a fair amount of DNA in terms of like there are builders, there are engineers, there are cowboys, and you're using those to buy cows and take a train, although that's pretty spurious in this one, and build buildings. And so like those core things are there. There's a loop in the game, that you kind of repeat over and over again. In fact, I actually think that the El Paso board is the most honest version of what a Great Western Trail board should look like. It's a true loop. And so it has all that stuff, but I think the strategy, the focus, like where the game's like mechanical effort is very different than the Great Western Trail series, all 3 of them.
Yeah, I mean, the last time we talked about these was the Great Western Trail episode, and like we kind of ended with
Great Western Trail episode.
And we ended talking about
New
Zealand.
I love that episode.
It was great.
We did.
But I really like New Zealand, but it was like had even more stuff. It just so much stuff. And then El Paso comes around, and I don't even know how big the box is going to be. I think it's going to be small because there's so much less, like a quarter the stuff, a quarter of the rules, like significantly different, which goes to what you're saying about like it's a different game that has Great Western Trail vibes to it. But like it's fast. Like I guess we should get that out of the way right at the very beginning. The 3 of us played a 3-player game where I AP'd like crazy, and the game still took about 55 minutes. So,
and I mean that is playing on Board Game Arena, so it does fire off faster because it does a lot of maintenance and deck shuffling for you and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's tough to say what it'll be like in real life, but I think it'll probably
I'd say
be
like an
pretty
hour.
similar.
Yeah. I think this is definitely going to be in like, well, what I consider a filler, which is an hour-long game. But it's definitely going to fill that. I think that the raw dice game is such a perfect example. It's funny. You made me go back, Nick. I was thinking like Nations. Remember Nations, the dice?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
that's even better.
Kind of reminds me
actually.
of that, right? There's any of those, right? Where you have like very much the same feel of the game. But what I think is so interesting is that you were just talking about New Zealand, Jonathan, and I think that El Paso takes the best piece of Great Western Trail New Zealand, which is the deck management, and puts that into this game. Like and to me it expounds like from a design, from like an evolutionary perspective, like it expounds along that concept of truly like the deck management, but the deck management being useful from a multitude of strategies, I think in like a really, really fun way. And obviously in a much lighter game.
That's interesting.
Right. In New Zealand, you get the dog or the bird, which gives you little benefits, and then you get to immediately draw another card. In this one, your workers, they are cards that go into your discard pile when you use them. And then when you reshuffle your deck and you draw into those workers, then you kind of like lay them out in front of you until you essentially cash them in to do some ability. And all of the worker cards have their normal ability on the board. Your cowboys buy cows, your builders build buildings, your engineers drive the quote-unquote train. But they also have a secondary ability, which is to discard them at any time for their benefit, which is like move an extra space, draw $1, spend some money to get a certificate. And that's a really cool flexibility for those workers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that they don't count as in your draw limit is huge. Like when you pull them out, they just come out, like Nick said. And so it's such a fun way to like cycle through your deck and to pull them out of your deck. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, when you discard them for their effects, they go into your deck. And when you use them, they go into your deck. So unlike, the main Great Western Trails where they just hang out and they're kind of like a escalating power level, here they come and go. And so, yeah, I totally agree. Like paying attention to where your deck size is at is a big thing. There's a wild worker that could count for all these things and you could discard them for $2 and the engineers can discard for 1. And I mentioned that granularity because there have been many times in this game where I'm looking at my deck and I've got like 3 cards on the top. I'm about to do a cash in, so I'm going to draw a big new hand. And I have like 2 engineers and a wild worker sitting in front of me. I'm about to reshuffle my deck. So do I discard them for 1 + 1 + 2 or $4? Throw them into the discard pile, shuffle the deck up, and potentially get them out again? Or do I hold on to them because I have them? Because then it's like guaranteed I have them for another thing. So essentially, do I roll the dice, have some guaranteed money, and then potentially get them back out of the deck earlier? I think that's a really interesting decision. And you have nothing like that in the other Great Western Trails, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot more push your luck with the deck kind of stuff and when you're choosing to discard your workers and everything. And the fact that there's the wild worker and the way that the workers come out essentially, inconsistently as opposed to like having them in a structured tableau. Yeah, it means that this game, I think, is a lot friendlier to hybrid strategies or kind of like trying different stuff along the board, letting you kind of respond more tactically, which I think is a big part of the reason why John likes this. I'd say the best probably of any Great Western Trail iteration.
Spoilers, I really like it.
On that responsiveness, that like in the spur of the moment decision making, rather than I'm going to play this game and like have that work for you.
Yeah. Well, also like if you say, okay, I'm going to go heavy builder, for example, you use them and then you might loop around and then have no builders, and you're like, where are all my builders? They're stuck in my deck because I used them last time. Well, I guess I'm not building this loop.
I feel like the game really incentivizes you to do a version of what you were just saying, Nick, which is like do multiple strategies. If you're familiar, at all with any of the Great Western Trails, as Nick was just saying, like you do tend to sit down, especially with the OG, and pick the thing you're going to do, right? And so if you're familiar with, those, I'm going to build, I'm going to cowboy, I'm going to engineer, I think it's really fun to start thinking into those hybrid strategies, to start thinking I'm going to need to do 2 of these, and maybe, right? Like it's not even a need. It's like it incentivizes you to be like, okay, I'm going to go just enough into cowboys. So I'm going to have some cows. So I'm going to get better deliveries. Then I'm going to pivot over into buildings. And then how useful that I had the cowboys, because those cowboys, I could also discard them to move farther. Like the fact that every worker does another thing means that it's never, any worker that you have is useful to you. So it's not like, it never feels bad to be like, man, I have 3 engineers. I better get a 4th engineer because that's, I need to have more. It's like, no, maybe you do kind of want to diversify because it gives you more options, more things you can do. My favorite and best games of this have been ones where I've had just a ridiculous amount of all types of workers and just been able to kind of like combo them into different little pieces and never really went too high in any single one because I'm just like, okay, I'm going to get just enough here and just enough here and do this. And there are objectives and bonus tiles and all sorts of like other little things that kind of happen. And it's just, if I had a word for this game, it's fun. It's just fun. Like there's always something to do and things that kind of like pop off back at you. So you're taking a lot of luck and a lot of these core concepts that we already know and love from the previous games, if you like the previous games, and then just kind of always giving you something to do with them. So it just removes a lot of the pain and suffering, let's put it that way, from, I think, some of the previous games.
So this game has a much smaller board than Great Western Trail. And, like the other one, you stop at the end and you cash your cows in and get stuff for it. But another big difference, it's hard not to compare, is that every time you cash in El Paso, you get a cow, a Simmental, a 2-value cow worth nothing. And
Simmentals, come back.
I'm actually kind of curious for Nick's specific take on this, because you've played El Paso like 25 times and you've played Great Western Trail 1,000,000 times. Because in El Paso, it almost feels like a counter pressure to like just zipping around the board, because every time you do it, you get this mediocre cow, and it bloats your deck. Like the faster you go, the more bloated your deck is going to be. Whereas in the original games, that was not the case, and it seemed like maybe zipping around is a really good thing. And I don't know, how does that struck you when you've been playing it, Nick?
I like it. I think it's good. I like that it says, hey, if you just whip around, you're just gonna have a bunch of these cows in your deck. I like that it gives you another problem to solve. I think also. Yeah. I have a suspicion that, as the game goes on, you get more and more workers, and without adding additional cards to the deck, it could be that people just kind of like flopped out their whole deck at once, and it sort of was like required from a mathematical perspective to make the game not like explode.
Yeah, that very well could be. Or like it lowers the odds that all your workers are just right next to each other.
Yeah. The other thing that's really significant about the deliveries is that you always get $5, whereas in the other Great Western Trail games, you get money based on how strong your delivery is. And in both games, you get rewarded for having good deliveries. But in Great Western Trail, it's a portion, like a small portion of your scoring. Whereas I would say El Paso is a lot more focused on those deliveries. It says, look, you're always getting the same amount of money. Your engine isn't changing based on your delivery, but the reward system that you're getting, which you're unlocking on your board, and the victory points that you'll get at the end of the game do, I think, much more reward having good deliveries in this game. And I think thematically that's a win, that like the cattle driving part of the game and having that like diverse hand array and some other ways to support the delivery of components of it shines again a spotlight on like this being an important mechanism in the game.
Yeah, but I do like that everything about this game I think is pretty well tuned and balanced to kind of like give you a good thing, and then like for example, the Simmentals that you get, right? You were saying, okay, they're not a great cow, but they're still a 2 cow. They don't give you any points, but they're still a 2. So in some ways, they're still better than the 1 cows in your deck, right? So everything, it's like you're bloating your deck, but they are making, they are slightly better cows. So it's also, promoting those deliveries. Or to your point, Nick, it does feel like the game is that true loop, right? Like you want to do as much as you can and then deliver and kind of keep a tempo going. And I think it is a more tactical game. There's a little bit of a racing, you got to keep your deliveries up to kind of stay on speed. But I found it interesting that the amount of points that you're able to get elsewhere from the game, like, are not so dramatically less or more than the amount of points you're able to get from delivering. And it's actually kind of hard to get points from your delivering until you kind of get to that second level of delivering. So maybe if you go super deep into them, sure, but I do think it's pretty well balanced in that way. Like even in the last game that we played, now this didn't help me at the end because luck did not go my way, but I kind of held a balance of like, I could actually get more points from the loop than I could delivering. So I'm going to let Jonathan go finish the game by delivering, and I'm going to just try and pick up my points. Now, my deck didn't give me what I needed. I didn't get those points. I lost, whatever. I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like I completely agree with Nick that I feel like delivering is a central mechanic to the game, but I find it interesting that it isn't. I used to feel in Great Western Trail that if you didn't deliver and get massive points from it, like you weren't going to win. I think I like that it doesn't feel like all the points come from delivering, but it does feel really important in terms of what it unlocks and what you can get from it.
I see. Yeah. And, going back to the loop and the speed and everything and the Simmentals, the more I think about it, the more I think all this stuff is connected. You couldn't just throw things away to move faster in Great Western Trail. Like, you could upgrade your speed once in the game, but then you could definitely plot things out. Like, okay, I'll go here, then I'll go here, then I'll go there, 3, 4, 3, 4, etc. But here, I mean, Nick, you were just telling us like 2 days ago that you had a loop where you looped 2 turns in a row because you ditched like 4 cowboys or something like that, right?
I did a 1-lap delivery.
Yeah.
Like I just like delivered, boop, delivered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if the Simmental thing came in because of that as well, because of the mechanic of the cowboys letting you just supercharge around the board. Like that's almost like maybe a little bit of a break there.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And this is another thing that I think is different from the other GWT games is that the board structure disincentivizes people from placing buildings in blocking spots. They cost more money to slow down your loop to go around the board.
Yes.
And also they did away with taxes and everything like that. So other people playing buildings is not as painful as it was in the other games, which is, I will say, a limiting interaction component in this game. This is a more solitaire game than the other ones are.
Definitely. I felt that even tonight. At first, this was the first, like, I think, true live play we've had. We played a couple of live plays where we weren't, like, talking with each other. But I even felt tonight, I was, like, expecting it to feel more interaction in person. And I was like, no, I'm still, like, it is a pretty multiplayer solitaire game. And that's, we were playing on BGA. We've noted that and everything. It's going to feel different at the table and all that jazz. But I do think that the main point of interaction in this game is that racing component that we're talking about. The game end timer is the number of deliveries, not dissimilar to the other Great Western Trails, but making sure that you stay on pace with that, or you're watching for that, or keeping up with that, because this is not a long game. No. Like it is over before you think it is. And so I think that that's really where you're going to get your main point of interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just playing tonight, and I looked down. I'm like, okay, I finally got my stuff. Not like done. I was like, okay, I felt like I'd like righted my ship, and then I looked over, and the game was almost over. I did win. It worked out well for me, but it was definitely one of those like, oh, what? Excuse me, this might be my last cash in. I thought we were in the middle of the game. I was just having such a good time because it took like 55 minutes or so.
Well, it's funny what you were just saying, Nick, about your one loop delivery, and we haven't quite touched on yet the buildings in this game. And I think for me, this is probably one of the greatest improvements over Great Western Trail, if for only the fact that I have interacted with buildings more in El Paso than I ever interacted with them in Great Western Trail. And that's, even though I played Great Western Trail a lot, I feel like in this game, the buildings there's less of them. I have just felt like it's been easier to parse, and I've been like, cool, here are the buildings, let me work with these. And they're communal. Everything in this game is kind of communal, but it is the buildings in this game, most of them are several of them are jumpy buildings. That's what I'm going to call them. That is the technical term. So speaking of moving, it's not the technical term. Speaking of moving around the track, like I did a game last week where I had like a 3-jump building onto a 1-jump building onto a delivery. And so like I did the same thing as you, Nick, where I did a 1-loop delivery, but like with my cowboys and the jumpies. And I was just like, man, this feels good. Like it just like it didn't even this is one of those games where it like doesn't even matter. Like for me, if I'm winning, it just matters if I executed my engine, my plan, my whatever well.
The buildings in general are a lot more focused on that acceleration component and sort of like, here's an additional thing you get from this building, but keep it moving along. I think in large part to keep the game moving along, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
It has that purpose.
Now, one thing you said just a bit ago, Nick, you commented that on the loop, that the most expensive building spots are the ones where you would slow things down. Like it costs $3 extra to go onto this spot, and it just makes everybody's loop a little bit bigger, versus some free spots that are off to the side. And I've played this game 5 times now, and what I've started to notice blatantly is there's like half of the building spots I've never seen built on. And you've played this like 25 times, Nick, so that's why I'm kind of curious to lean on your experience there. But like, there are 3 cost spots, and I always think about them, but money is so tight in this game, usually until like the last third to quarter, that I just can't afford it. Like I even oftentimes can't afford the 1 money to go onto another spot, but in particular those 3 spots. And I agree with Anastasia. Like hopping from building to building, just having these massive turns can be a lot of fun. But I keep finding myself constructing on the same positions and going for kind of the same combos, even though there is some differences with the buildings. I personally wish there was less jumpy in the game to cause more decisions of like, do I go A or B as opposed to like A, B, C, A, B, C. But even on top of that, I don't know. Have you seen people build on those 3 cost spots? I want to see it happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tactical decision about like slowing other players down for doing that, and it depends on what the setup of the game is. I think there's a certain level of nuance there that requires just a lot more plays, understanding of like what other people are going to be doing and paying attention to what other folks are doing, which is like not something I would do in the first few times I would be playing a game. And honestly, having played it now a bunch of times, there's a lot of times where it's like, okay, it's not going to slow you down really significantly, so I'm going to do exactly what you just said, John, the same spots over and over again because they're obviously the best spots, right? Like in terms of they're cheap, exactly. But they still, maybe work with my loop or whatever. This does kind of segue a bit into like the buildings in general are okay, but also are one of my biggest criticism areas in the game. So there's 2 things that I don't love about the buildings. One is the communal nature of it is a neat idea. There are 2 buildings of every type that are available. The problem is that if the 2 of you build a building that I want to build, then I actually just can't do that anymore in this game. And so the game, even as early as turn 1, right, the person in like 3rd, 4th seat or whatever might not be able to build the thing that they wanted to build because the other players did. Now, there are alternate options, of course, other things that you can do. But as Anastasia said, there are not really that many buildings. So from a building perspective, like you might just say, okay, well, I'm not really focusing on the building strategy this game. And you can play the whole game and build no buildings and have that be a viable strategy. So I'm not saying that it's essential, but you might just not get to play with a certain aspect by no choice of your own. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I don't like is that I think one of the buildings in particular is not balanced. And like I know that it's like really a dangerous thing to get on the internet and say you don't think a game is balanced.
Unbalanced
but
alert.
I'm pretty good at these games. I've played this game 25 times and I'm convinced that this one building, both theoretically on paper and in practice, is just not okay. Yeah,
can I guess what it is? Can I guess? It's number 2, right? The level 2 building?
Number 2A is what it is.
The objective and move building.
Yeah, the one that lets you buy the bonus tiles it's too easy to build. It's too cheap for what it does. I think it is game warping. And I'm honestly really surprised that, I mean, it could be like a perception thing, but I don't think so. I've really tried to play around it. I've tried to play other things without it. All my highest scores have been to it. All my losses have been to it. Like it's really, it's pretty game warping.
Yeah, I won tonight and I leaned into it. So just for like a little bit of context on this specific building, it lets you purchase a bonus tile. There's a bunch of bonus tiles in this game, and they give you a variety of things: victory points, money, cull stuff out of your deck, permanent certifications, making your cash-ins better. And yeah, this one building just says, go onto it, spend 2 money, and then get one of these bonuses, which frequently give you money, which could be even more money than you just spent, and then you get to move your cowboy again. And yeah, and so like in this game, like very first turn, I built it right next to the train, and then I hit it every single time. I didn't win by a mile, but I did win with this, and I think I've won every time I have leaned into this building, and it's super powerful. And it was really fun the first time I played it. I was like, this is so cool. And then now that I've seen it like 2 or 3 times since then, I'm like, I wish it was a decision. That's why, like, I wish it didn't have the jump or something on there. Like, it's an auto thing. Like, well, spend $2 to probably get $2 back and get some points.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting to focus on that building because it kind of speaks exactly to what Jonathan was saying and obviously what you're saying, Nick, which is like this particular building, there are like, it's a spot at the top of the track or the top of the loop, and there's a spot right before the delivery that are like the 2 best spots to put it in because obviously you can, immediately jump on it and then jump onto the building when you know you're going to have money at the top of your loop, or you can use it at the end of your loop to just auto use it and then deliver. So there's just like some obvious uses of it that like I've seen in almost every play. My last few plays, though, it has been interesting because of what we talked about, the communal board. Mm-hmm. If I played it 3 or 4 players, the other 2 players have taken it. And that means that I obviously am not going to take it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of, when that hit me in one of my last games, I was like, okay, like, what am I going to do? Right. And it kind of forced me into building level 1 building, which ended up being pretty strong for me, more than I expected. And then upgrading that into the level 3 building that gave me a worker. And then suddenly that was one of the games I was referencing earlier where I had all these workers because I kept hitting that. I was like getting 2 workers per loop. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And so it did push me to do other things. I honestly can't remember if I won that game, but I actually think that the fact that I can't remember if I won that game and it's still like one of my favorite memories playing the game speaks to the fun of what I was doing despite the building. This is not me arguing that the building is not imbalanced. I do think that it is really strong and it's there. But I do think that it does create, if you're going to play this game a lot, interesting opportunities to challenge yourself around it or to do other things with it. And I like to think that there is maybe more to be done, but man, being able to buy those bonus tiles, and then there are so many objectives that pay you back for those tiles, and those bonus tiles almost always help your delivery. That is some strong stuff.
Fortunately, you could just not play with it. You could flip the building over and go with the other one. Like, this may be a little early to say it, but like, I'm totally buying this game. I think this game is super cool. I'm going to show a lot of people, and I fully expect that I might frequently to most of the time flip that building over to just not have that one in the game. Not necessarily even because I think you're definitely going to win. I mean, I think it's strong. I just think it's uninteresting. Like, it was fun the first time, and now it's just like it's warping to the point where I'm like, am I really not going to take this really awesome thing? Well, I guess I'm taking the awesome thing again. Like, I'm sugared out, man.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing might work or even be bad if it was like it cost $1 extra to activate its ability or something like that. Like, I don't think that the concept of it is inherently a problem. I just
actually,
from what I've seen, it seems a little bit too undercosted as well.
Yeah, like even $3 instead of $2, because somehow I've like always just managed to have the money. So like there is some interesting play in that could be found. But I think that, I want to point out that like your first few plays exploring this game, also if you played it too, you can both take it and then go have a party with it, right? So like, and that can just be what you do. I think your first few plays, you're gonna love exploring with it, and you're not even gonna notice the overpower. It's just gonna be like, okay, let's like explore and do all of that. And if you're gonna play this game 10 times, then like now you're gonna play it like all of us, like where I'm gonna be like, I mean, I was almost mad that I took it tonight because I was like, I don't really want to. Like, I wanna go play and do other things.
I've gorged on this ice cream
because of exactly
already.
what you said. It's like I don't even care that it's good. It's just like I want to do different things. But
you did end up taking
one nice thing. I did end up taking it, but one nice thing about this game is that there is a lot of different ways to play it. There's a lot of variety in that setup of the loop, the way the buildings come out. We had a really weird flop tonight, honestly. So that was like, that changes the way of the game. I do think there is still some intentionality. You pick an objective at the beginning of the game. We haven't mentioned that, but that almost immediately kind of makes you don't have to complete it, but in this game, there's like no penalty for not completing objectives, and
the points are really good on them too. Like,
and the points are really good on
great.
them. They're great, and like that's what I was saying earlier with like deliveries are kind of the equivalent. Like even some of the best deliveries only give you 2-4 points, right? And your objectives can be 3, 4, 5 points. So there's
for things that you've already done.
Yeah, for things you're already doing, right? So there is something just like really fun. So like I know we're just talking about this building and all of those pieces, whatever, but there is something really fun about all the different ways that you can play this game. So I find myself often sitting down and being like, what do I want to explore today? Like, which way do I want to go? Like,
what's the map telling me?
Yeah, what is the map telling me? What is my initial hand telling me? It still has the thing where you can start anywhere on the loop, just like the other Great Western Trail games. So it's like, today I started and did like an immediate 9 delivery, and the 9 delivery happens to give you a free worker. And I was like, this is fire. Like, and so like whatever it is that you're doing, there's just so much more going on than just like, oh, hey, there's this one super building. Like, it might still be there, but I might not even want to touch buildings this game.
Yeah, that's very true. So this might be a little bit deep in the podcast to bring this up, but I'm curious about what you all think about the theoretical concept of somebody never having played Great Western Trail before. And, because like it's so hard not to compare. And like we've done a ton of comparing. We've talked about what this game does as well, but we've all played a lot of Great Western Trail. I'm also trying to, like, lots of people haven't played these games at all before, and they might be coming into this completely new. And I think it might be interesting to consider, like, what would this game be like for somebody who has never played these before? Like, maybe they played Dominion or Ascension, so they, like, understand the concept of deck building in general. That lens seems interesting to me. I mean, it's so hard, obviously.
Yeah, no, I think it's a cool question. People are going to call this Great Western Trail light, and they're right. It is.
I already have multiple times.
But it's not a light game. I don't think that like this isn't a gateway that you go from Ticket to Ride or something like that straight into this. I think that's a little bit of a leap. For I would guess for people. I don't think it's like that they couldn't engage with it. It's just that there's like a number of different systems. Every building has different rules about how they work. There's 4 different auxiliary actions. You have to understand the rules for all these symbols. And having played Great Western Trail, the shortcut of I know that picture, I know that picture, I know that picture, I know the vibe of what these workers do helps really get into the gameplay super quickly. I don't think this game is incredibly easy to load up, even with its numerous differences. If you have played one of the Great Western Trail games,
I didn't even read the rules the first time we played it until like halfway through. I just was like, oh, I get it. And I learned it as we went. Yeah.
And if you haven't played Great Western Trail, but you are a gamer, you're going to be able to learn the rules of this game much more accessibly and much more speedily than you would any Great Western Trail game by like a fair margin.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a great intro. If you were like, how do I get my friends to play Great Western Trail? You put this in front of them first. And if they hate it, then you're not going further.
That's actually an interesting point. Like a litmus test / like stepping stone.
It's a stepping stone.
Yeah. Almost more so than even some of the other games we've talked about, like Terra Nova and Terra Mystica. I mean, I get it's like, maybe it's similar to that, but this really, I think, dials things down a lot, or it distills it down into those concepts. Like if they're intrigued by the loop, like, you've got them, right? Like you've lassoed them. And I've been waiting all pod to say that.
And I guess like just thinking about the audience, the you that's listening to us, odds are good anybody who's listening to the Friendly's Highs podcast will, like, this is not going to be an intimidating rules teach for that.
Yeah.
But I also think that this game probably, because I don't know it for myself, but I think this game could be a very engaging experience for people who have no experience with these other ones. I wish we had shown it to somebody. The problem is everybody we play with has played Great Western Trail.
Everyone knows Great Western Trail. But you know what though? Like I truly believe. First of all, I believe if you bounced off Great Western Trail, like frankly, like Jonathan, like I think that, or if one of the other iterations, like particularly New Zealand, like kind of brought you back, or you really like some of those mechanics, like I think you're gonna like this game. I think this is. If you like the core of Great Western Trail, but there were elements of it that, even some of the meanness and other taxes and other things or the heaviness, I think this is going to be great for you. I think there's a reason that I said that it was like a gamer's filler, and I think you're right. Like our audience, anyone listening to an hour of us deep dive into a game probably is the perfect audience for this, because this is going to be your kind of filler. I don't know though. I'm kind of inclined. I think, Nick, you're right that maybe you can't jump from Ticket to Ride to this, but with the right kind of gamer, I don't know. For me, I think this is on like a fromage level. I think that if you can kind of handle, this is a reference that not everyone might get, but if you played Fromage, another recent release, that is a game that, has a lot of gamery things in it, but is light enough and engaging enough that I think it's going to kind of tempt people in. The thing that, Fromage has that this doesn't have is, the cheese theme. I don't know how much the El Paso theme is going to call the non-gamers, to bring them into this. Yeah.
You need milk first before you make the cheese, right?
Can I just say, I follow an Instagrammer who raises cows, and the other day she was talking about her breeds of cows, and she was like, one of them is a Simmental, and I was like, what?
It's real.
Believe it or not, at a game convention, I met a guy playing this game, and he was like, I was the cow consultant on this game, and I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, they put the wrong cows in the first edition. And so I talked with Alexander Pfister and said, you should contact me.
Good
and the
on
dude's
them.
like,
Good on them.
he now they have all the correct cows for the correct places.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I'd love to hear
I freaking love it.
I mean, if I was comparing, I know it's a recent one, but like the more I think about it, the more I'm seeing River of Gold as being a comparison. You know, we did a podcast on that a couple times ago.
Yeah.
In fact, in that one, I was like, "This is what I want a Great Western Trail to be." You know, kind of a blunt thing.
They gave it to
about
you.
the rondelle, and I think I think El Paso is actually there. But you know, they both play about an hour, and I think they're pretty similar complexity as well. So I think this one might do well. Like, I'm just thinking about it, like it hitting the greater gaming sphere. I hope it does, but I also think it could.
I do think one thing that'll work against it is kind of what Anastasia was saying, that like the theme doesn't necessarily scream anything. The map is kind of like really like ruddy, dirt looking. Like it's not terribly beautiful. It's table presence not popping.
Same art as Great Western Trail. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna have to lean on certainly its reputation as a game, I think, more than the beauty of it.
That makes sense.
I will say that as a game, I think one of the things that's really cool about this, that you're maybe even getting from listening to us talk about it, you know, as in depth as we are, is that for such a, I'm going to say quote unquote light game, like there is a lot here. There's a lot of strategies. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of meat. It triggers, you know, I always love a game that triggers a bunch of discussion, you know, in our Discord and conversations that happen around it. Like it has triggered a lot of interesting talk about strategies and pieces for, you know, what might not otherwise, a level of gaming weight that might not otherwise trigger that much discussion.
Yeah. I mean, part of that I think is because we played asynchronously. I definitely had a couple moments, like I had one dog walk while it was like almost my turn, and I spent the entire dog walk like mentally mapping out the different options I was going to do. And I got to my car and it was my turn, and I just like sat in my car and like taking my turn on my phone. I'm like, yes, I did it. I did the right thing.
We're slowly dragging Jonathan into the asynchronous world here. He's this is new for you, but
yes,
this
true.
one has helped open the door. I do think another good comparison for this is probably Pirates of Maracaibo. If you liked Pirates of Maracaibo, obviously another Alexander Pfister game, like another Maracaibo is to this, you know, is to Pirates of Maracaibo, I think pretty similarly as Great Western Trail is to El Paso. I mean, in a lot of ways, Pirates actually kind of became its own game even more so. But I think you could argue that is also true here. I actually feel more similarities, probably because of the loop and the map and things. But I think it's another example of two games that can really stand on their own. And I have found, for example, Pirates of Maracaibo to be far more accessible to share with friends than Maracaibo. So, and for people who've never played Maracaibo, like that game has really stood on its own, I think, in the intervening months since I've had it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it being so quick has made it very easy also to play it a lot. And I know, like, people might have noticed a little bit of, like, annoyance that I have with that one particular building. And maybe I feel like the buildings are a little bit jumpier than I want. Like, maybe I wish the game was, like, 15 to 20 minutes longer on average than it is. And I feel like if there was less jumping buildings, maybe it would. But you can't really fault a game for being nice and quick so that you could put a lot of reps in and then start to feel like you've done similar things a couple of times. And I don't want to like overstate the similarity as well, because like I played it 5 times and I know that when I get this game, it's going to be in my go-to game night bag for probably like a month or 2.
I think the tempo, they do a nice job with when the game ends. Like it doesn't overstay its welcome, and I think it could very easily overstay its welcome if it went just a little bit longer. So I think they hit the timing of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it is one of those games, just like I was saying with the depth, that really rewards you for more plays. You know, it is, I was just saying tonight, I played a cow-ish strategy. I did some other stuff, but I was trying to get, you know, go get the highest level of cow. And I was commenting that I was like, oh, it's not as interesting as doing the buildings, but maybe it wasn't as interesting because of the way I played it. And it showed me that like I bloated my deck. And then I was like, man, you know, I wish I hadn't bloated my deck so much trying to do that.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, there's so many ways to trash cards. Like, so it almost like it's one of those games that you finish and then it kind of challenges you to be like, cool, how could I do that again and do it a little bit better?
Mhm.
Or, you know, another game I played recently, I realized I hadn't really done anything with the train. Like I'd played it, you know, 5 or 6 times at that point, and I never really interacted with the train that much. And I was like, let's see what the train does. And then I was like, oh my God, the train is so cool. Like when you get up on the train, it gives you all this stuff. And like, that's really cool. And it doesn't immediately present itself as being as cool as, say, the buildings or some other things that, you know, you might kind of just immediately gravitate towards. But then once you kind of look at it a little bit more closely, you're like, cool, this is just another way to play. So I think it's just, again, going back to that game that, just like you were saying, doesn't overstay its welcome and then rewards you for playing it more. I could easily see finishing this game and then being like, do you want to do that one again? Like, I think it's that kind of game.
It does seem like you need to hybridize your strategy. Like I have also tried in one of my games to go like just cow, like all cows, big cows. And that was my worst game score-wise, and also probably my least interesting game. And in retrospect, yeah, I think you got to work some other things in, work a little bit of building, or a little bit of train, or a little bit of just like heavy worker strategy. Like I don't think big worker is really a strategy in the original Great Western Trail, but like it kind of is here. Like I played a game once where I just went crazy on the workers with the help of some buildings, and yeah, I think you need to like dabble and kind of come up with a color mixture as opposed to just going hard on one thing. And I guess adapting.
Yeah.
I mean, Nick, you mentioned it's more tactical. So like, I think in that game where it's like, I'm going to go really big into the cows, that ham-fisted attitude is not going to really work there. I think you have to kind of be like, well, okay, well, I didn't draw the right cow. Well, instead of being like, dang it, I'm going to make this happen, be like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Like, how am I going to adjust this strategy?
The workers are points, and they're obtuse about it too, where it's just like every worker is these points. They're all 2 points, or maybe 3 if it's a wild. Whereas like in the other series, they're like, buy a lot of the same one to get rewarded for it. And you're like, okay, I guess I'll really narrowly focus then.
I think that might be honing in on why I like El Paso so much. I mean, the speed, all that kind of stuff, that's all good. But my biggest complaint, I think, about Great Western Trail is that I always felt like the game was asking me to do just one thing heavily. And here it feels like that's been inverted. And that's the brain space that I much prefer, is dabbling in various things while focusing more on one thing, but still really wanting to do a whole bunch of other things at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. I think I've made my thoughts pretty clear on this. This isn't one of those things where I'm like, oh, El Paso is going to replace, you know, Great Western Trail for me, or actually Great Western Trail New Zealand is the one that I've held on to. But it's definitely going to go on the shelf next to it because it's just an easier game to get out and play. And it's like I said earlier in the podcast, like it's just fun. Like you're going through it and you're like, oh, is this going to happen? And exchange tokens are in this game. And so you're just like having a lot of fun being like drawing from your deck. Am I going to get what I need? And somehow in several games I played, there's been some moment where it's like, oh, everything worked out magically. And that was fantastic. There's also been many moments where like things like didn't work out. And then I'm like, but it's, for the most part, throughout the game, there's just continually been these moments where I feel like everything in this game is kind of tuned to like making you feel good as you're playing it, whether that is those buildings that are always giving you good stuff, or there is workers that have multiple things they can do. And just as you learn the system, it's such a satisfying feeling to be like, oh my gosh, I have 11 and I really want to deliver 12. Oh, I have a worker, I have a builder, and that builder, if I pay 2 money, which of course I have, I get an extra certificate, and then I can actually deliver for 12. Like constantly feeling like you have what you need, or you can go and pray to the luck gods and hope you get what you need, and you know, whatever that works out for you or not. There's there's a lot of really feel good moments here that make it really satisfying. I love that, like you just said, John, and you've said earlier in the podcast, Nick, that, you know, hybridizing your strategies, doing a lot of things is really benefiting. And I like a game that asks you to do something and then says, okay, what are you going to pair it with to do that best? Like, I did go hard in cows, but I needed to pair it with something else to execute it best based on the setup we had, based on what you guys were doing, based on the choices I made, based on the luck I was getting. And it just makes for a really fun soup every time. Yeah. So, I've just had a lot of fun with this one and really enjoyed it. And I think that if you like Great Western Trail, or even if you didn't like Great Western Trail, I think you should check it out because I think it's pretty good.
It wouldn't surprise me if people who are really into Great Western Trail might bounce off this.
Well, I guess it's the question for Nick. Who's
I think so. I really do think so. You mentioned the exchange tokens. They are at their absolute best in this game. And that is because the deck drawing part of it is so important. And that's going to lead to what I am going to say is probably my biggest critique of the game, that I think some listeners are going to hear and say, actually, for me, that's a positive. But I think the luck in this game is really, really high. The impact of shuffling, it's always about shuffling your good cards to the bottom of your deck. The impact of shuffling an early cow purchase to the bottom of your deck, making it difficult to get those big, important early deliveries. The importance or the penalty of shuffling your workers to the bottom of your deck. There's really a double penalty for this happening, because suppose that you get a pretty unlucky shuffle and you shuffled all 4 of your starting workers as the bottom 4 cards of your deck. It's incredibly unlikely this will happen, but just bear with me for this example. Then when you go through the second loop of your deck, you're not going to get to do any worker actions except for ones that you buy straight off the board. And when you get to the bottom of the deck, because the workers instantly replace, as you draw them, you trigger a deck reshuffle. So you'll put those 4 workers into play, trigger the deck reshuffle, and then not have those workers in your deck the third time around.
They'll miss the cycle.
Something like that. Like, you might not do it with 4, but if you do it with 2, or you do it with maybe just even your wild worker, is so incredibly hampering. And there's nothing you can do about it. There's no way to fix it. You can't go out of your way strategically. The way that the deck shuffles in this game is more penalizing than any other Great Western Trail game by like a fair margin.
Interesting. I guess the thing that makes that tolerable is its length. Like, if it really all goes south, well, at least it's quick.
At least the suffering will be over soon.
And it's not like you can't play the game then. Like, you're going to be hampered. You're going to be not doing as big things as your opponent, but you'll still be able to interact. You can still, make choices. You're just going to be very far behind. And I think that aspect of it is just, it's important to go in with the acknowledge that can happen.
Yeah. It is absolutely there. And it does add, I think it adds an interesting element, if you like this kind of thing, at making choices about when are you going to draw from your deck, and are you going to cause a reshuffle, and what are you going to put in, and all of those things. And I've enjoyed that added puzzle. But I do think it, like you said, Nick, sometimes the luck is just, it's not going to work, and it's going to trigger something you're going to be digging, and it's all going to go south, and you're going to get stuck. And then you're like, and not it's not that every action in this game is important, but it does sort of feel like it is in a game that is so focused on tempo that you kind of want to be able to do something with everything that you're doing. And there are going to be moments like that in a game that has quite a bit of luck, especially compared to the original.
Yeah. As somebody who's not an expert at the original, there were a lot of times playing that 2 to 2.5 hour game where I'm just like, oh my gosh, my card draw luck. But we're different people, right? And so like I said, I think I asked the question, but I also agree, I think, with Nick that like a lot of people, I think, could be like, I love Great Western Trail, I'm going to get El Paso, and be like, what did they do to my boy? But then there's people like me who don't own any Great Western Trails anymore, and will own this. I will probably only play this like compared in the Great Western Trail pantheon. I will probably never play Great Western Trail non El Paso again, unless they come out with another one that changes my mind, because this just works so well for me, and I'm really glad they made it. I'm glad that there is now officially a Great Western Trail that gets me excited and gets me really wanting to get it to the table. And I think I was the target. Like people who A, haven't played Great Western Trail, or B, bounced off of it for a variety of reasons.
Totally.
Yeah.
Overall, I have been having a really fun time playing this game. I definitely don't think it's going to be, I tend to be get excited and go really deep on a game. And so this isn't going to be that game for me. I've, played maybe 25 times is enough for it to already be deep anyway.
He's not going to go really deep in it. He's just going to play it 25 times and anytime we want to, but he's not going to go super
deep. I'm trying to be number one rated on VGA, we've got objectives here.
Okay.
Goals.
Yeah, John beating me tonight really ruined that.
I know. You should have done unscored, man. You know better. That's like me playing John on Yukata and Vikings like an idiot and doing scored. What was I thinking?
So it's a fun game. I think it's a neat system. I think that I'd love to see more game designs use this, like shuffle components of your game into your deck. As essentially like as a way of, as an evolution of the deck builder genre, of something that doesn't just go into your hand and then like get used as a card that you play, but instead like comes out and gets recycled, as it's almost like a double deck in some ways. And even though I just groused about the luck component of it, I do think there's something very interesting about that. I think that the dual worker use in this game is really, really, really satisfying. It's not complicated. And there's just a large number of times you're like, I need $1 extra. Engineer, yeet, like, let's go.
Later.
It's really nice when you're
so
like,
satisfying.
I can figure out how to use this guy because I was jammed up, and they really help you out. So when you hit those nice strides, when your deck it doesn't even need to cooperate with you perfectly, but when it's cooperating with you like at a normal statistical bell curve reaction, I guess I would say, then the game feels like it really hums. But there are definitely games where, and in the number of games that I've played, there's some where I'm just like, this is a slog, and once I fall behind, it becomes even more, and now I just like have to execute, and I know I'm going to lose. Like I have to play for another 40 minutes, and the first couple rounds have like pretty much determined the rest of this game, and that's not great. I think that the balance issues in this game are going to ultimately hamper it from being a really great game for me. But ultimately, it might be the version of Great Western Trail that I'm most likely to own, because I actually would play this casually with other people.
It's easy to table.
And that's not true for the other games.
Yeah. Kudos to them for, like you said, like taking pieces of the design, putting together a truly unique and separate game, like to make something fresh that we could explore, and that is frankly more accessible to a lot of different people, and a great gateway into, like we talked about earlier. If you like this and you're gonna loop them in, you might be able to get a few more Great Western Trail lovers.
There's so few of you out there.
Yeah.
Well, I think that takes us to the end of Great Western Trail El Paso. You might not have had the chance to play yet because it's really kind of only in this one thing. But if you have, leave us a comment, or if you're really excited, tell us what you're looking forward to or what maybe sparked your interest in this. If you're listening to the podcast version, you can head on over to YouTube to drop comments in the section there. Thanks everybody for listening. It was great having you today.
Yeah.
Is that your yeehaw? I love that.
Bye, y'all.